Great news for homeowners. U.S. home prices are at an all-time high, breaking the previous peak set in July 2006. The leading measure of U.S. home prices, the S&P CoreLogic CASE-SHILLER Index, reports a 5.5% annual gain in September, signaling a full recovery from the housing crash. Joining us to discuss is WSJ reporter Laura Kusisto. Laura, thanks so much for being with us. So does this mean the worst period for the housing market since the Great Depression is over and we can all celebrate?
At least by some symbolic measure it is. We've sort of spent the last decade talking about, oh my God, home prices are falling by 25%. Then we've really just then spent the last 4 years watching them slowly climb out of that hole. And in a way, we can kind of put a symbolic period on that very difficult decade.
Sure, it's been a long time coming for some homeowners that have been underwater for maybe close to a decade now at this point, right?
Yeah, for sure. If you bought a home in 2006 and you're now finally starting to see it worth what it was before, you can now sell that home, you can go get a job in another city. It's a huge sort of sigh of relief for some people.
So let's dig into the recovery because, like most recoveries, this one is uneven, correct? So let's talk about where the cities are that have seen the most gains in home prices.
So we're seeing a divide it's the kind of divide we're talking about a lot in the country right now, where these big coastal cities in New York and California, Seattle, Portland, those cities have seen dramatic recoveries. They're seeing prices in many cases back above what they were before in 2006. Then you have sort of the Rust Belt cities that have just seen a real long, slow drag. They maybe didn't see prices drop as much, but they're really not seeing them go back up, and it's really painful for those places.
So Seattle, Portland, and Denver seem to be on the forefront. Now, what about those sand states? We heard so much about how so many of those homeowners suffered particularly deep losses. Are they recovered?
So that's the big caveat to this. No, they're not back to where they started. They're not even particularly close, especially if you adjust for inflation. And the truth is, maybe they really shouldn't be. In places like Phoenix and Las Vegas, those were really fueled by speculation, by easy mortgages. They probably, it could take another 10 years for them to get back to where they were.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because we do know that some of those prices during the housing boom were fueled by lax lending standards from the banks. So do we know what is fueling the current price rising?
Yeah, we do. And we don't necessarily like the answer. It's being fueled by a shortage of homes. A lot of home builders went bankrupt during the crash. A lot of them haven't come back. Even those that have are really hesitant about building. And so what's really fueling this, it's not rising incomes, it's not demand from young people buying homes, it's just that there aren't enough homes for people to buy.
And there are some economists who are sounding a note of alarm, or at least of caution, saying, look, we don't see the national economic indicators to warrant quite this level of home prices rising, correct?
Yeah, normally we'd really like to see wages growing actually a bit faster than home prices. That's what's kept the U.S. such an affordable place for people to live. And the fact that home prices are really outpacing incomes, it's a little bit unprecedented, and no one knows where that ends, but there's a good chance that long term that's just not sustainable.
Let me ask you quickly about interest rates, though. We have seen them creeping up, and there's a good chance they will continue to go up, even though they remain at historic lows. Won't that bring the cost of housing down once the interest rates start to go up?
Actually pushes the cost. Well, yes, it pushes the price of housing down and pushes the cost of it up. Right. Makes it harder to afford it. And so, yeah, that will, if those interest rates continue to rise, that will for sure have a dampening effect on home prices, especially in places like California, where they were already just kind of totally out of whack with sort of historic levels, what people can afford.
All right, so mostly good news, Laura, with little notes of caution here and there peppered in.
Lots of notes of caution.
That's right, lots of notes of caution. Laura, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.